Hey, what's going on, y'all? It's your boy Joseph, and today we're going to take a look at 8 tips you should know about your credit card. I'm going to go into things that I wish I knew about when I first started using a credit card, as well as some things that I think will help to avoid common traps that'll lower your credit score. That way, by implementing these tools, you too can have better credit managing skills and reach that coveted 800 credit score that will make you money in the long run. Also, I just want to give a quick disclaimer that this list is pretty generalized and it's more so based off of my personal experiences. So there may be some things that may or may not apply to you depending on the situation. And I'm not really going to go into the whole edge cases of each scenario. Otherwise, this video is going to be just really long and drawn out. So just keep that in mind. So with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Tip number 1, don't buy things that you can't afford. Quite simply, if you're trying to buy a $60 video game but you don't have that money in your checking account, don't buy it. Think of your credit card as a tool that shouldn't necessarily change your purchasing patterns, but more so as a bonus that gives cash back for the things that you already are or were going to buy. Just because you can buy it with your credit limit doesn't mean you should. And you should just follow this guideline to avoid getting into the habits so you don't get carried away. This is supported by how much credit you are utilizing, which makes up 30% of your credit score. So if you're regularly maxing out your credit cards, you're letting creditors assume that you're a very risky individual because you're putting a lot of your income on debt payments. And it gives them the thought that you're gonna default on those payments. So by lowering your credit utilization, you not only decrease that conception, but also increase your credit score. Tip number 2, try to always pay in full and on time. The reason why you should do this is for 2 reasons. For 1, to avoid late payment penalties, and for 2, to avoid interest on payments. This is typically indicated by your credit card's APR, or annual percentage rate. So let's say, for example, that you bought something for $300 and you made the minimum payment of $50. It's now $250, but there is the potential of interest adding on to that $250 that you owe. Now let's take that same example and say that you bought something for $300 and whatever the deadline was, you forgot to make a payment on it. Depending on whether your card gives a grace period, you'll get a late fee and a delinquency that stays on your credit report for 7 years and lowers your credit score. And it'll continue to lower your score if you don't pay it off. When that happens, your creditor will eventually mark it as a charge-off or a loss and sell your debt to a collection agency that will call you nonstop to pay it off. Your payment history makes up 35% of your credit score, and by neglecting this tip, can result in negative repercussions. Fortunately, there is a simple way to avoid this, and this is through setting up auto pay on your credit card. If I could rank a tip as being the most important, this tip would probably be it. This tip has saved my skin multiple times over the years, mostly because I'm pretty forgetful at times. I would buy something but completely forget about it because life happens, but it's okay because autopay has me covered. The next tip we're going to talk about isn't necessarily exclusive to credit cards, but it can benefit your credit in an indirect way. And that is through enabling 2-factor authentication and having email or text notifications. I think that security is very important, especially because of the occasional reports of data breaches in the very sites that we use. And while it is a good idea for you to have some 40-character password, it doesn't really matter if they already have your account credentials. Therefore, by having 2FA enabled, they either have to have access to your email or your physical phone in order for them to access your account, which can prevent unauthorized or fraudulent payments from occurring. As for enabling email and text notifications, there are times when you hand out your credit card to pay for like drive-through or like dine-in at a restaurant or even retail. And while there's nothing wrong with that, there is the possible chance that someone could steal your credit card numbers and use them in a wrongful manner. By having notifications set up, you can be aware of the fraudulent activity the moment that happens, and you can freeze your account and make appropriate measures to make sure the charges don't escalate. And while you should log in from time to time to make sure that things are as it should be, it does reduce the hassle of having to log in every single time, especially with 2FA enabled. Tip number 5. Lower your card credit pulls and space them out. Every time that you apply for a credit card, you get what's called a hard credit pull on your credit report. This is when a credit card issuer takes a look at your credit, and it usually has to be authorized, typically through an application. These credit pulls stay on your account for 2 years, And while they aren't necessarily bad in small numbers and they may or may not affect your credit score, having a large number of them is a bad idea and can lower your credit score. So you should be more wary of how many credit cards you're applying to, and if you can, try to space them out at least 6 months apart. Tip number 6 is to avoid closing your credit card accounts and to avoid them being inactive. You may reach a point in your credit card journey where you have a credit card that you got in the early days when you're building your credit history, but you don't use as much because the benefits aren't as good as the ones that you have now. And you definitely don't want to close that account because the average length of your credit history makes up 15% of your credit score. But you also don't want it to become inactive to the point where the credit card company ends up canceling your account. So the best way to make sure it remains active is to put a small recurring charge on it, such as Netflix, or a gym membership, something that you already know that is something you're going to pay for, and it's not going to minimize the cashback bonuses that you can get on your better cards for your other purchases. Tip number 7 is to set up travel notices. This is when you let your credit card issuer know when and where you're traveling to, because if they see a charge that doesn't seem like the normal area that you'll be spending it in, they may think it's suspicious and end up declining that charge and possibly putting your account on hold. This can be problematic if you're trying to limit the amount of credit cards that you bring during an overseas trip. And while it isn't required for some credit card issuers, if you can, I still highly recommend putting it on there just in case. Tip number 8. Be aware of foreign transaction fees. This is simply a fee that you get in addition to any purchase that you make in international countries. This amount depends on the card, and I've seen it as common as being 1 to 3% of the charged amount, or a flat fee that you pay per transaction. I know for my case, the first time that I traveled internationally, I didn't have a dedicated travel card, and I think it was like 3% foreign transaction fee. And over a 2-week period, that costed me an additional $60. So if you're traveling overseas, make sure you have a proper payment method that will either reduce or eliminate any unnecessary fees. And there you guys have it, the 8 tips that you need to know about your credit card. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you liked it or thought it was helpful, drop a like below and consider subscribing and hitting the bell icon. I upload every week, and you definitely don't want to miss the new content that will help you save and make money. But until then, hope you guys have the great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.